presentation and apply it to your everyday life. My colleagues and I are here today, are students in the Alternative Dispute Resolution Program from Humber College. So next slide, Chanel, please. First, I would like to give you some background information on Humber and our certificate from the St. Stephen's Community Mediation Training. So the program is recognized by the Alternative Dispute Resolution Institute of Ontario as meeting the educational requirements for membership. The ADR program focuses on community mediation, administrative tribunals, labor law, family law, and conflict management design. The program uses intensive workshop training to teach core principles of mediation, negotiation, and arbitration. By applying these skills, we learn to resolve disputes between individuals, within families, businesses, and government and community agencies. Next slide, please, Chanel. So next, I would like to speak about the Humber College Dispute Resolution Clinic. It was launched in January 2019 with Ignite in the St. Stephen's Community House. The campus is located on both Lakeshore and North campuses. ADR students provide free conflict coaching and mediation service to students and the community. Right now, the clinic is available by virtual appointment, Tuesdays and Thursdays from 10 to 2 p.m. and Fridays 10 to 4. Some of the services include conflict coaching, conflict de-escalation tips and strategies, facilitated mediation, and conflict management workshops. If you or someone you know is struggling with the conflict, the DCR student clinicians are here to listen and help you. So if you are interested in that, we have a link here that we will share with you where you can make an appointment if you need that extra help. Next slide, please, Chanel. So the St. Stephen's Community Mediation Training is a community-based social service agency since 1962. Some primary services include conflict resolution and training. Each year, they help about 1,500 people resolve conflict. My colleagues here today, we have successfully completed 21 hours of community mediation training, which means that we have a certificate that permits ourselves to volunteer at any community mediation service across Ontario. And also we serve on the DRC at Humber College. Now I would like to pass it on to Chanel, who will speak more about what is conflict.
Thank you, Nicole. So the question is, what is conflict? I'd like you all to ask yourself, what is conflict? What does conflict mean to you? Is conflict good? Is it bad? Is there positive and negative results to conflict? Think about it. If you have anything that comes to mind, please place it in the chat as well. We will be looking at the chat. Any of the hosts will be happy to also answer some of the questions. So what is conflict? Anne, go ahead.
So what is conflict? So conflict is a state that exists when one party's aspirations are incompatible with another party. And you can ask, what's aspirations? So aspirations is basically needs, what we want, what we need. And so conflict occurs when the aspirations of a person or a group is incompatible with the aspirations, meaning the want or the need of another person or another group. So here I kind of have like a little demonstration on what it means. So E has its own needs, its own wants, and that's not equal to F. What F wants and what he thinks is different. So that's why we say the aspiration of both E does not match with the aspiration of F. Can you please go on to the next slide, please, Chanel?
Thank you, Anne. So if everybody has come up with, what they think a conflict is, here are some of the things in regards to negative and positive results. Conflict is inevitable. We all know we all come into conflict in some sort of means, in some sort of ways. So there are positive and negative results. Is conflict good? Well, people do change and grow personally. The conflict results into a solution or to the problem. It can result into a solution to a problem. The increases of involvement of everyone affected by the conflict. It builds cohesiveness among its members or teams, and it develops collaborative processes. So conflict can be good in a sense where everybody is aware that there is conflict, and then once you're aware there is conflict, we all can come together and come to a solution. So don't necessarily think conflict is, all bad. So when it comes to, is conflict bad? Yes, it diverts your energy from more value adding activities or issues. So conflict can draw back people from, wanting to participate into something. The issue is too big for them, so it can cause a problem. No decisions is reached, and the problem still exists. It destroys the morals of the teams or individuals. It also polarizes or divides teams or groups of people. So the ability to effectively engage in a critical engage is a critical skill. So conflict, how you manage yourself, what you understand, what you take away from conflict. Just keep that in mind. It's not always bad, but there are good aspects about having conflict. Okay.
Yeah, and to add on to what Chanel said, thank you, Chanel. Conflict exists everywhere. Conflict is universal. And with that being said, conflict naturally happens when it's either in relationships or even cultural. There's conflict that exists in every format, but it's treated differently. And I see here that Penny did say that conflict can be positive, which is absolutely true. And in a positive way is that we take conflict and then we look for possible solutions out of it, and we can learn from it, right? So absolutely, Penny, thank you for sharing that as well. And also, because conflicts are universal, parties can develop and share an understanding through either consultations or exchange ideas amongst themselves to solve the problem and reach a solution. And now we're going to go to an example. Next slide, please, Chanel. So I have an example here between the two couples, Ellie and Frank. So Ellie and Frank have been married for 2 years. Ellie's goal is to own a home and start having children, whereas Frank does not want to own a home or have children because he wants to travel. Ellie and Frank have a conflict surrounding how they want to manage their money and their future. Now, in the chat box, feel free to let me know what you think the conflicts can be due to their incompatible aspirations. And again, aspirations means their needs, their wants, what they want to do. So please go ahead and write down what you guys think both Ellie and Frank's conflict are. Okay. We have from Navi, freedom versus roots, which is absolutely true. Yeah. I'll give it another minute or two. From Barbara, one conflict is that Ellie is looking for stability and security, while Frank is looking for excitement and adventure, which is absolutely true. Yeah. Angela, there are not on the same level of wants and needs. Absolutely, because one person wants to travel and one person wants to develop their family, of course. I have here Diane. Ellie wants stability and growth and growing a family. Frank wants freedom and extroverted activities. Absolutely. And all of these answers are correct. And thank you so much for all the participants for writing this down and sharing this thoughts with us. Now I'll move on to my colleague, Nicole.
Thank you, Anne. So here we're going to talk about the approaches to conflict, and there are three. So power-based, rights-based, and interest-based. Power-based is an approach where there is the use of power to pressure the other party to do something they would normally not do. So this includes use of authority, threats, manipulation, and intimidation. The second one is rights-based. So this approach, it has a standard where a rule has to apply in a case or standards, so such as like laws, policies, and religious moral codes. And the last one is interest-based. So it approaches conflict by asking the question, what needs or underlying interests are you trying to address by a certain position? So yeah, now I would like to pass it on to Chanel, who will speak about causes of conflict.
Maneuvering this, it's very interesting. Causes of conflict. I believe, Anne, you can go first and then I will follow.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, so causes of conflict. So one of the causes can be relationship conflict, and that could either be miscommunication, strong emotions, stereotyping, repetitive of negative behavior. And within relationships, it's not really has to be between a couple. It can be between colleagues or even at workplace, your boss and you're the employee, and there's like a lot of miscommunication there. And then next we have values. So a value conflict is basically different ways of life, ideology, worldview, and different ways you would evaluate certain values you have within. That being said, not everyone would want to accept your values. And that's when we start having that value conflict. And another one I would like to bring up on is interest conflicts. So we all have different interests. We are all unique in our own different ways. Given that, sometimes the conflict can portray as a procedural interest of how things should be done. One person might want to go from A to B just directly. One person wants to go all around before hitting that endpoint. But at the end of the day, the outcome is the same. And there's also a psychological interest and maybe also perceived or actual conflict over interests. So there's a lot of different point of views a lot of people take when it comes to interest. And sorry, I just lost my train of thought. And so when it comes to interest, you just have to reason with yourself, hear out what the other person says, and then maybe you could come to a solution. But there's always like two sides to a coin, right? And Chanel, do you want to introduce the other side?
Yes. So adding on causes of conflict, the other two parts are interests of conflicts, the perceived or actual conflict over the one's interests. Another one is procedural interests and psychological interests. Interest conflicts, again, it's somewhat similar to, having a different conflicts, again, to what other people's interests are, where their interests lie, how they perceive their interests over other people's. That becomes a conflict. And another one is also structural conflict. There are unequal authorities, unequal control of resources or time constraints. So an example for an unequal authority, I would use like a personal example where, you know, you have two siblings, one is older than the other, one feels more entitled than the other due to the fact that they're older. So that is an unequal authority. Again, whatever I say goes. Not necessarily I'm the parent, but I'm the older sibling. So because I'm the older sibling, that's the conflict there, where the younger sibling thinks maybe because they're not the parent, they don't have to, you know, listen to that older sibling. So that's an idea of structural conflict as well, in a sense of authority. So to our next slide is conflict management styles. Now think about it. There are about 5 conflict management styles that we are going to talk about, and I will have a visual that everybody can see and watch how these styles are being perceived as. So what we have is avoiding, accommodating, competing, collaborating, and compromising. So I'm going to go ahead and play the video. And then when it's done, we'll come back and we'll continue with the other slide. Sorry. Is it playing? Can everybody see this? Can see it? Okay. Oh.
As the Chinese say, all great battles are won without fighting.
Sorry.
Okay?
I don't know him.
And let's just calm down. Now I'm about to beat the puberty out of y'all. You ain't gonna see it coming. You ain't gonna see it coming. Come on. Woo! Running for your lives. By the time y'all show some respect around here. Huh?
Carter, wait for the master.
Whoa!
How about this? I promise I won't pester you about the DVD. You can defecate in peace. That's a win for both of us. But until this matter is resolved, I would like you to wear this sweater.
Would you be prepared on a non-presidential basis to create an emergency ad hoc Slurpee Icy equivalency?
Oh, Leonard, you know I can't do that.
Okay, I guess we only have one option.
Yep, I don't see any way around it.
Bye, Sheldon.
See ya.
Later, dude.
They're right, it was the only option.
With my dad, I realized that the shadows coming off those 2 lamps were in the wrong spots. I think someone tampered with this crime scene. Who could do that? Someone smart, someone experienced, which is why we need to recreate the scene so that it is exactly the way it was when the cops got here. All right, fine.
Now, I hope watching the little clips here from the YouTube video give you a sense of an idea of, the different conflict management styles that there are. Am I still sharing this video? Yeah. Yes, so our next slide will be Nicole. You can still hear me, right?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So I'll send it to you. Just mute my mic.
Okay, thank you, Chanel. So here we're going to talk about the 5 management styles and the approach. And we're going to be using an example of who should get the last piece of cake. So for competing, the approach is do it my way. The example being, I want the whole piece of cake for me. Collaborating is let's resolve this together. In this example, it would be, why don't we consider other desserts that could be options instead of only cake? For compromising, the approach is, I'll give you a little if you do the same. And in the example, it would be, let's split the piece of cake in half. Avoiding, it takes an approach of conflict, like what is conflict? So I don't feel like having cake, even if I really do. And lastly, accommodating with the approach of whatever you say is fine with me. And in this example, it would be you can have the piece of cake. So next slide, please, Chanel. Okay, perfect. So the Thomas Kilmann instrument is designed to measure a person's behavior in conflict situations. The model identifies 2 dimensions when choosing a course of action in a conflict situation. So these are assertiveness and cooperativeness. Assertiveness is the degree to which you try to satisfy your own needs, and cooperativeness is the degree to which you try to satisfy the other person's concerns. So by learning how you handle the conflict and how people around you handle the conflict, you can start to see how these styles work together toward a common goal. And sometimes in certain situations, we can have 2 dominant styles, and our conflict style can change depending on the situation and the person you're involved in the conflict with. So we're going to post a link where you're able to identify your most dominant to least dominant styles. And it's a great tool to know what your style is, and it helps identify triggers. And also when you take the test, sometimes you will be surprised, but most of the time you're like, okay, yeah, that sounds like me. So it's a very great tool to use. And we will post a link in the chat for you to be able to complete the test. So now I would like to pass it on to Anne and Chanel, who will speak about how people respond to conflict.
Okay, so again, just to reiterate what Nicole said, there is some links in the chat where you are able to do a conflict style self-assessment yourself. You can do it now, you can do it when we take a break, you can try it out, see where your conflict style or your dominant style is. In regards to how people respond to conflict, there are different people deal with conflict in different ways. There are diverse ways. Each person has a dominant style. It normally becomes more of a naturally a natural base that a natural reaction. That is a lot of people. For myself, I've done I did my self-assessment, and I noticed that my dominant style is to compromise. I am more willing to compromise and leading to collaborating in any situation I come into. I try to find ways that both of us or both parties, can come to an understanding or a solution to a problem. Going back again, dominating styles can change, and you don't necessarily have to have that same dominant style, just depending on the situation. Normally, when that style will come out. So over time, it changes over time with experience, and again, to suit the type of environment that you're in. Under certain circumstances, your dominant style may change. Again, the key skills to understanding how you naturally respond to conflict, how the other parties are responding, and what responses is the most appropriate to approach in certain circumstances. Again, like I was saying, every situation will most likely have a different outcome. Different conflict style may occur. May not normally be your dominant based one that you usually go to. It may change. So that being said, again, referring back to responses to conflict, ignoring to avoiding, pretending or not acknowledging a conflict does not, not acknowledging a conflict does not exist, can only last a short period of time, can lead to escalation. If you don't address the issue, it can, you know, progress into something else and becomes a bigger situation. Yielding to accommodating, giving up what you feel is important to you for someone else's aspirations, as Anne suggested earlier in her other slides. Your aspirations, your desires, your interests, what you are interested, referring to, then, you know, considering other people's interests. Something not worth trying, or there is a slim chance for success, can become rebellious afterwards. So, you know, the more you're accommodating, it can cause for, you know, a setback for yourself. Contending to competing. One party stands firm to fulfill what they feel is important to them over the expense of what's important to the other party. It's a win by any means necessary. The approach can be of a power or a right-based position. Cooperating to compromising to collaborating. Each party takes into consideration their aspirations and the other's aspirations as well. It's a continuous relationship. All parties coming together to find a solution. All parties are satisfied with the outcome, and it helps remove the conflict. This is one of the best things to use when having, I guess, depending on the situation, but it is one of the most effective ways to come to a solution for conflict. And going into our exercise here. So here's an exercise for identifying the conflict style. So a poll will be, we will have a poll for this. So you can answer in the poll your answers there. Maria, I believe, will be able to post the poll up for us. So here's the scenario. Chris and Steve have been best friends for over 10 years. Whenever Chris wants to go over to Steve's apartment, he just shows up unannounced. Steve doesn't want to tell Chris to not come over, but it has really been interfering with Steve's work from home. So Steve has said nothing and allows Chris to come whenever he wants. Last night, Chris sent a text to Steve asking if he could come over late at night. Steve wanted to say no, but instead said no problem. Posting up in the survey. Can everybody see it? Just wait for Maria. Okay, let me know. We'll give it a few minutes, a minute or two. Let everybody answer. Okay. Okay. Just waiting for everybody. Let me know when the answers have come in. No survey. Just Jessica, did you get a chance to put in your survey answer? Okay, great. So Maria, whenever you're ready. Okay, awesome. So I have some people put compromising, okay? You can think that Chris and Steve, Steve doesn't want to tell Chris no, but he still insists for Steve to come over. Chris to come over. Avoiding, there is avoiding there. Steve didn't want to tell Chris no, so he avoided his initial answer to Chris by telling him no. Accommodating, yes, there's a bit of accommodating. So the full answer on everybody, most of the people got is accommodating and avoiding. So here we have accommodating. Last night, Chris sent a text to Steve asking if he could come over late at night. Steve wanted to say no, but instead he said yes. So again, he avoided his initial answer to tell him no, and instead he decided to accommodate Chris sent Chris to come over. So that is an example, which is good. So to debrief that, so things to consider. How do you think Steve felt at the time? Do you think Chris knew? How would Chris behave if he knew? What do you think his reaction would have been? How could have Steve better dealt with the situation? What are the consequences of Steve not dealing with the conflict? Those are things to consider when you're thinking about, the different conflicts and conflict styles that are being used. So the takeaways would be, you don't have to always use your dominant conflict style. The proper conflict management can improve our relationships and experiences. You can use multiple conflict styles at once. Take the time to think about how to approach conflict before behaving or addressing it. These are things to consider, to think about. Just keep in mind, it does depend, and it does, move on to different areas of conflict. Again, it all depends on the circumstances, the situations, and how you approach it. So that being said, I'm gonna switch it to the next slide, and Nicole, you're up, go ahead.
Thank you, Chanel. Have you ever lost control of your emotions and did something in the heat of the moment that you later regretted? If your answer is yes, then you've probably been hijacked by your amygdala. The amygdala is a collection of cells near the base of the brain. This is where emotions are given meaning, remembered, and attached to associations and responses to them. So emotional memories. When faced with a situation with strong emotions, the amygdala automatically activates the fight or flight response by sending out signals to release stress hormones that prepare your body to fight or run away. Some symptoms include rapid heartbeat, sweaty palms, and goosebumps on your skin. These are, again, triggers include strong emotions such as fear, anxiety, anger, and shame. Next slide, please, Chanel. So some strategies for dealing with the amygdala hijack. So take deep breaths, take a timeout and pause, focus on your thoughts, and move away from a topic that is causing distress. So it's really important to be able to identify what our triggers are, to be able to know, like, okay, I need to take a step back, I need to pause to collect my thoughts. So it's important in every aspect, whether it's like in personal relationships, work, and even knowing like your coworkers, what triggers them, to be able to assist and avoid like conflicts. So with that, I would like to pass it on to Thalia, who will be speaking about triggers.
Hi, everyone. So let's talk about triggers. So to begin, we all have them, whether we are conscious of it or not. So if everyone can just take a second to think about, what is something that triggers you? You don't have to put it in the chat if you don't want to, but, just take a second to think about it. What is something that makes you really mad? Something that makes you anxious, makes you even feel sick? So, our triggers can stem from a lot of places. So we could have been experiencing some trauma at some point in time. We could have unresolved conflict that we are still dealing with. And, we have intense feelings and a lot of other things that come up when we are in a situation where we're triggered. So your senses, actually, surprisingly enough, can bring on a trigger. So something as small as maybe a smell of something can trigger you, right? Tone of your voice aggressive, loud voices being silenced, right? Yeah, there are a lot of things that trigger us. And, what it is really like a protective mechanism that comes out in us. There's something that makes us feel unsafe and that we need to protect ourselves. So, other people might think that your reaction to your trigger seems a little bit out of place, but, they don't understand what's happening inside of us. Just like we could judge someone for behaving in a way that it doesn't really make sense in the situation, but again, we don't really know what's going on inside of them. So another thing really is that you might not even be conscious of the triggers that you have. You could be responding in a triggered way, but never really took the time, or, maybe you never realized what your triggers were. So if we could go to the next slide, please, and we'll just talk about some common examples of triggers, right? And we talked about this in the chat. A couple people said feeling disrespected. If you see a clutter in your house, you see a mess, it can trigger us. Loud noises, right? Yeah. So, you can ask yourself too if there's any underlying assumptions that you're making. What is making you feel unsafe in a particular situation? Do you have any prejudice or past experiences which are really informing how you see situations? Grouchy people, right? When someone is grouchy, that's we respond in a defensive way. So we're all humans, really, it's part of life. Like, we are going to be triggered. Not listening. Yeah. So also, if you can take a second too, maybe next time you're feeling triggered, if you can ask yourself, is this serving me? Is my response helping the situation? Do I even know I'm experiencing a trigger? Yeah. So with triggers in mind, Chanel, if we could just move to the next slide, and we will explore our best versus worst self. So again, just take a second to think about a time that you were performing at your best and a time that you were performing at your worst. Sorry, one second, let me just open up my notebook. Okay, so your best self, and this is subjective, right? This is not objective. So this is what you personally think about what your best self is. And I'll use myself as an example, right? So the first condition of your best self, what is required for you? So what is mandatory for you to be your best self? What are the conditions involved? So for myself, I need to be rested, right? Have a good sleep the night before. I need to have had breakfast, my coffee, all the important things. I need to feel safe and I need to be in a clean environment. I know that those are the conditions that are mandatory for me. And this is subjective, so everyone has different conditions. The next one would be your strengths. So when you are at your best self, what are your strengths? So mine would be, I'm feeling very creative, I'm logical, I'm patient. So, and then number 3 is your impact. What is your impact on others? Are you helpful? Are you able to make other people feel loved and appreciated? What is the impact you have on others? And then the last one is, what are your emotions? How are you feeling? So mine would be happy, calm, and proud. So if we could maybe look at our worst self, think about a time where, you weren't happy with how you were behaving, with what you were thinking. So the first one is you're triggered. So that's why it's so important to understand what your triggers are, because you will be performing and acting as your worst self when you are triggered. And then what's your behavior? Are you being passive aggressive? Are you being hostile? Are you maybe ignoring other people or being rude? And then what's the impact you have on others? So when you're behaving as your worst self, do you think that you are contributing to other people feeling bad, feeling maybe self-conscious, unloved? And then what are the emotions that you're experiencing, right? So in your worst self, are you ashamed or guilty after the fact that you were behaving in such a way? So, people can also get trapped in a cycle of being your worst self, right? You act as your worst self and then you're guilty about it, but you don't really resolve the issue why you were your worst self. So it's really important that, we question what is making us behave this way? What is putting us in this situation? So, mindfulness, and I don't know if you guys know about, mindfulness meditation, but, it just comes down to being present with yourself and your thoughts in a non-judgmental way, experiencing how you feel, and that's okay, right? So when you learn about your bodily sensations, right? When you can detect that your worst self is coming on, maybe you feel kind of like a pit in your stomach, or you start feeling tense, right? So if you're able to recognize when your worst self is coming on, you can better learn coping mechanisms tailored for yourself to prevent your worst self from coming out. So it's not easy work, right? It's really hard to learn about what makes us upset, to challenge our emotions, to think about our impact on others, but it's really rewarding. It's really great to learn about how we can make sure that we strengthen relationships by trying to stay at our best self and, hopefully not harm relationships when we act out in our worst self. So could I ask you to please go to the next slide? Okay, perfect. And Wuchka, this is you.
Thank you, Thalia. So having said that, we discussed about the good self and the bad self and the triggers. We are now talking about the deteriorating conversation that a person has with another. So we will be talking about what deteriorating conversation is. So a deteriorating conversation means that when a person is having a negative conversation or a conversation which is not suitable to have, when the conversation between two people are falling apart and it's going in the negative way rather than running in a positive way. How we build a positive conversation aspect are follows as how we deal with the goals, and the positive aspects of it is that we will be noticing the goals that we should keep in mind. One should start developing the trust and the other person, and in the conversation keeping in mind that the words we use and should be neutral and should be positive and should make a safety kind of conversation. One should keep in mind the following goals, keeping in view that their dominant style are, first of all, its main concern about to be restore safety, build trust in, build trust. This not only helps in building the relationship, but also the respect. Clarity in the conversation is one of the important aspects that one should have during their conversation with the other person. And this will not only help in building the trust, but also a respect with the other person. Apologizing in one such way wherein we accept that we have a negative comment made, or we are going in a negative direction to it. So the best part is, if you feel so, you can actually apologize in the real sense and you mean it, not just by saying it. The other aspect or goal should be that you avoid buts, but should add ands to it and start accepting the fact that what the other person is saying. This not only helps in moving your conversation to a positive aspect, but also from a position to an interest-based thing. Could we move to the next slide, please, Chanel? And over to you.
Sorry, I was muted. Hey, so I'm going to talk about the impacts that result in unresolved conflict. So how would we feel? Like sometimes in the back of our mind, that conflict constantly would come to us and always trigger us, and it would put us down. It would polarize or divide teams or groups of people. It destroys the moral of the team or individual. If there's no decision, the problem is still there. It's still there and it still needs to be solved. It can divert energy from more value adding activities or even issues. So it can build upon each levels. And now I will be passing it on to Ruchika again, just explaining difficult people and how we would see it as well.
Thank you, Anne. So we understand that how it is to handle or to understand how difficult it is for people to think in this way, especially when we are in a bad self or when we are triggered. So when people think that they are difficult to handle, maybe because of, you can think of an example wherein you have been in a difficult situation or handling a difficult time. So probably, especially with me, that happens is that probably I will be an avoider at that point of time, having my dominant style as collaborative, but yet I might not be able to listen to what the other person is saying. I might reactive. I might act out in an aggressive way and not appreciating what the other person is saying. Driven by my own agenda and not accepting the fact that the other person and what's its interest and what their mind is saying. How do we make it feel? How does it impact our communication? So these are the important aspects that one should understand when they are in a difficult situation. In order to avoid the difficult people or in order to avoid difficult situations, what are the strategies one should adopt? One should be empathy and not sympathy. One should give more of empathy style, not more of a sympathy style. Try to find underlying interest and values of the person and for yourself, that what are my interests in this particular situation and how should I achieve it? And let go your ego, which is one of the most important aspect that one should consider when they are in a conflict. Think of a cost and not helping them. If the emotions aren't talking about, that the actions are, which is one of the very, very famous saying that action speaks louder than words. Chanel, next slide, please. I can see one of the comments stating that listening is a very big piece. If one does not know how to listen, it in itself is the conflict of self and others. That's very true. Thank you. Difficult conversations. So there might be very many situations wherein we are in a difficult conversation. So here we will be talking about one of the conflict styles that was said earlier in our PPTs, that one of the conflict style is avoidance. How a person avoids a conversation or avoids their particular situation when they are in. That talks about having a dominant style as an avoider. One, too much to take on. They are not accepting the fact that they cannot accept it and they avoid the situation. They are emotionally distressed. They react in emotional way and just avoid it, just want to move on and not address the problem is one of the basic criteria. Like when an avoider when a person has a dominant style of having avoidance, people generally, what we have seen is they generally avoid it and they do not address the problem or the situation. They feel somewhere insecure about the situation, and the lack of confidence. Yes, the crucial conversation that one should have is a discussion between two or more people where stakes are high, opinion varies, and emotions run strong. So one of the important aspect is the emotion part, and the outcome generally greatly impacts in their life. Next slide, please.
Okay, so I will take over from here. Thank you, Ruchika. So I'm going to be talking about unhealthy versus healthy motives of dialogue. And I see here, Stefan, yes, absolutely. Like when you're dealing with customers, especially in either a restaurant or a big box field, like we get a lot of those angry customers who always try complaining and try finding a solution. And as customer service representatives, it's our motive to help them and make sure they are happy with the service that's given in helping them and assisting them to make sure they are satisfied and they're happy. And with that being said, the unhealthy motives that we have to try avoiding and try overcoming is to be always right. We always have to learn and try learning what the other person has to say, acknowledging what they have to say. So from being right, we're shifting to actually learning what is being said. And a most important piece of advice I can give is acknowledging what is being said. You simply do not have to agree to it, but you can acknowledge what is being said. The next one is look good, save face. So that being said, it's basically we always portray that we're always right. Whatever that's being said, no, they're wrong. I'm always right. I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm talking. But on the other hand, we have to also acknowledge that we have to find the truth, understand what's really going on, the root of the problem, know and understand the other person's truth. Sometimes by meeting in the middle, that's where the truth is. And so trying to drift away from always being right and think that we know what's right, but also meeting in the middle and finding the truth between both parties. And another one I would like to talk about is always winning. And again, it goes from what I talked before of being right. We can't always be right. There's also other ways and other motives behind that. However, we do have to acknowledge the other possibilities of maybe, like considering, maybe the other person might have something that I might have missed. And that in a healthier way, it's basically saying you're producing results. When entering into a difficult conversation, we want to achieve an outcome. And that's mostly by collaborating, working together, and finding an answer rather than just going straight around. Even if you do produce an answer, think back. How did I get this? How did I get to where I am today? How did I achieve this goal? So yes, you have achieved it, but then you're also trying to look back on the steps you've taken to achieve it. And it's mostly important to acknowledge the steps you've taken. And maybe for the future, you can use whatever the positive of that to help you out in the future. And then the next point I want to talk about is punish and blame. We always want to blame others for our problem. We never really want to acknowledge, okay, maybe I've done this. I should have worked on this. So if we always want to blame one another for a problem, there's not a healthy motive behind that. Instead, we want to strengthen the relationship. We want to build capacity and build a safe environment. So that would be more of a healthier motive and a healthier way of putting things. And another thing is avoiding conflict. So never really addressing the problem is not really hurting the other person or the other party, but it's also hurting us. If we don't address the problems, we're ignoring it. And then by ignoring it, it's still in our subconscious, and we always refer here and there and always refer back to that exact problem. A healthier way is accepting it, accepting that maybe we have
And I think
And
your
you're
mic is
muted.
muted.
Sorry, can you hear me?
We can hear you now. You got cut out.
I'm so sorry.
Sorry.
Well, did you catch what I said?
The last thing that we caught was about accepting rather than blaming.
Accepting rather than blaming. Oh, okay. So we're still on the second one, right? So accepting our problems and formulating the relationship, which makes it stronger. So build a capacity and build a safe environment, because safety is what really matters the most. The last thing I want to talk about is try people who avoid conflicts. So moving on and not addressing the problem can not only hurt the parties, but it can also hurt us ourselves. Because subconsciously, it's always going to come back to us regardless. Oh my God, like this happened. Like, how could I have dealt with this? How can I have overcome this problem? And by ignoring it, you're not really gaining anything out of it. There's no positivity in it. On the other hand, what a healthier thing to do is accept what is being said and accept that the truth might not always be, or understanding that the truth might not be right. You have to acknowledge all the other possibilities around you. And that can lead to humility. Humility not a lot of people love, but by accepting that and accepting that we are not always right is a big step forward on creating a healthier, more proactive relationship. And it most definitely removes ego that we have on one another. And we really need to listen well to help formulate a sense of resolution. So from stepping out of the box, we're moving on to a healthier, more proactive, more safe environment and try removing the negativity we have within ourselves. Next slide, please, Chanel. So with that in mind, resolving a conflict must change your mind and the other parties. And in order to achieve that, one has to be open-minded. You have to be open-minded, ready to listen, ready to acknowledge what is being said. You necessarily do not have to agree, but you have to acknowledge what is being said. And it's not bad or wrong to seek help. If you really need help, there's so many things out there. There's the ADR program. There is what we have right now, the greenhouse. They're all here to help you. And if that's not the way you want to go, maybe try directly talking to the person. We may want to talk to our family or friends about it, but maybe directly talking to the person can actually help you solve the problem. And with that being said, we have to be mindful and respect one another and respect what they have to say, what their perspective is. And being honest to yourself. You have to be honest to yourself in order to be honest with the others around you. Okay, I know it's a lot of information. So given that, we will be giving you a 5-minute break. We have been posting the tests in the chat. If you guys want to have access to it, by all means, take this time. It's going to be 5 minutes. So on my end, the time is 1:02. So we'll be back here at 1:07, and we will continue from there. Okay. Just a reminder that we are not sure if you can actually fully close it and then be able to come back. So what we would advise everyone to do is just to shut off your mic, your video, and then keep the browser on, because we cannot guarantee if you can come back. And then we'll see you guys at 1:07. Thank you.
everybody hear me? Yep, okay. The time is now 1:07, and I hope everybody is staying tuned for our next part of the presentation. So our next part of the presentation will be on the facilitation part. And Thalia, if you would like to continue, go ahead.
Yes, welcome back, everybody. Hope you are showing up as your best self and you had a snack and you are ready. So in terms of facilitation, it will differ depending on if you're doing a negotiation, if it's arbitration, if it's, we also learned about restorative justice and facilitating circle training. So it will differ in the process, but the main thing with facilitation is that the facilitator will be the process expert and the parties will be the content experts. So in every facilitation, there will be people who share their stories, people who are hearing different perspectives, working alongside each other to uncover different assumptions, motives, interest, clarifying issues, and the goal is to really build relationships. So, there are situations where facilitation might not be an appropriate option. Those could be better dealt with in other ways. But so the main goal of facilitation, share ideas, learn from each other, be open, have a dialogue. And Ruchka, if you could please discuss safe dialogue, which also plays into facilitation.
Sure. Thank you, Thalia. Having said that, we now discuss about the safe dialogue. I would like all our participants just to think for a minute or less that there are so many conversations, right? So when did you feel that you have a safe conversation or you felt safe during a conversation, and at the same time there might be a situation wherein you did not feel the same, and distinguish between both of them, that what is a safe dialogue and what is an unsafe dialogue. A minute to discuss about it. For me, I talk about my personal thing, that my safe dialogue is when a person, when I'm having a conversation with he or she or any other person, having a respectable conversation and having a safe conversation. So by having safe conversation, we mean there's a comment to make a safe conversation is when all the emotions and feelings shared are acceptable and not judged. Very true. Some of the dialogue, the dialogue has to be non-judgmental, impartial, empathy should be there, and ensure confidentiality, that the conversation that we are having should not be disclosed to the other person, right? So when dialogue is not safe, people may react by becoming silent or becoming aggressive. Facilitators at the same point of time must de-escalate before the parties become silent or aggressive towards the nature. Next slide, please.
All right. So a couple of you in the chat have already mentioned active listening. So this is something that we can do during facilitation, during mediation, but this is something we could also implement in our day-to-day lives, right? So just take a second to think about a time where you really felt like you were heard and understood. So what was that like, right? And can you think of a time where you felt like you weren't understood or heard, right? What went into that? What was the body language, the tone, the word choice, the location, right? We've all been in a situation where we have and have not been heard. And if I could just get the next slide, please. Thank you. So, Active listening is great because it allows us to uncover different interests, allows us to clear up any assumptions, it allows us to build our relationships. So one of the most important things is that we really seek clarity. So we've all experienced communication barriers or issues. So it's a great opportunity to allow yourself to receive new information and challenge these, assumptions that we've already formed. So in terms of mediation, we could also use the skill to uncover if someone, for example, is there in bad faith, right? So we're able to understand and question things that will really dictate the future of a mediation, of a conversation with someone. Chanel, could you please advance to the next slide? Okay, so we use active listening to uncover the whole story, right? It's really important to understand what happened, what people thought was happening, so we could clear up these misconceptions. It's important to think about how conflict is serving the parties as well, right? And we can uncover that through active listening. So we could figure out people's aspirations, what their future goals are, and how we can really heal a relationship. And this is done through active listening, listening to each other, the ability to empathize, right? In another person's shoes, acknowledge and hear what they said. So we could also use probing questions to help us uncover what these interests are. So on the screen, you could ask someone, what is your concern about that, right? So by using probing questions, we can really understand what the full story is and what people are thinking. And then let's look at some more techniques on the next slide, please. So something that you guys may have experience in, right? You're having a conversation with someone and you notice that they're biting their nails or shaking their foot, and you kind of understand that they're feeling nervous. So when you recognize someone's emotions, you can ask them about that, right? So what is it that's making you, feel this way? Did I ask you something that's making you feel a little bit nervous? So we have the ability to uncover emotions, and we can do this by asking clarifying questions. So the next 2 points, summarize and check accuracy, I think those go really hand in hand. So you could reflect back. So when you reflect back to someone, you're showing them that you are listening to what they're saying. You're summarizing what they said. When they hear what you said, you give them the opportunity to correct you, to make sure that you guys are on the same page. This allows people to feel heard, and it shows that you're listening. It shows that two people are coming together to work together to uncover issues, to heal relationships. And then silence is another one, right? So silence can feel really awkward, sitting there, not saying anything. Sometimes facilitators have a need to fill in the gaps of silence, but that's not always recommended, right? So by accepting silence, you are allowing parties to speak more. It gives them the opportunity to fill in the silence. And people sometimes just need silence to process what they just heard, what they're feeling. So it's okay to give people time to be quiet and think about what's happening. Yeah, it gives them the time to process emotions. Right, so clarifying questions are just so important, because what happens if you, for example, are facilitating something and you don't actually know what the issue is? And in your mind, you have assumptions of what their problems are, right? Are you imposing your assumptions on what the issues are rather than hearing what their actual issues are? So the clarifying and the checking accuracy are just so important to being on the same page with people. So next, Ruchka is going to be teaching us a little bit about reframing.
Talia. So we have been talking about the communication. So it is important to understand that when we make a comment, maybe that comment is a positive comment and it's a negative comment, but it also depends on how the person perceives it, who listens to it. So we will be learning a little bit about how to reframe a statement. So the purpose of reframing a sentence is to de-escalate the emotions and the calmness that we have in our statement, that will make the other person more comfortable about listening it and hearing it and reacting towards it. It is important to understand and learn what position is and what interest is. So it is important to move from a position to interest based approach, while thinking, for example, that I have a younger sister. So she says that I am younger to you, I will be needing more food or something like that. So instead of having a position, you should more focus on the interest, that if you are hungry, that you need more food. Describe issues as solvable problems, which is one of the most important criteria of a communication, that we communicate, we clarify stuff, and then move on to provide a solution towards it rather than making it more confusing. Develop shared goals when possible and trade off. The principles of reframing are as below, which are how issues are framed is important and must much more than words claim. It is important to identify and clarify, as Thalia has already mentioned you in the other previous presentation. Valuable information is even most hostile presentation about clarity and honesty, not simply smoothing over difficult issues. It is important to clarify and being honest in the communication. Must honor the most important needs of the parties and often reiterate. For example, we can actually use sentences like, okay, I understand that you have said this, or okay, I understand that you have been so grateful to us, or statements like I'm forgetting it. Do you have anything to say, guys? I acknowledge that you have appreciated us for something, statements like that. So it keep reiterating and keep cross-checking whether the person has actually provided you with the clarity and honesty. Next slide, please. So there's a small exercise for you all. There's a statement which says the refund takes an average of 10 to 15 days. How this statement can be in a neutral and a positive way. There can be two sides of this statement. One states that I can, and the other states that I cannot. The first states that, sorry, I cannot do anything. You won't have a refund for at least 10 days. Other says that, okay, the refund will take 10 to 15 days, but I can ask for it to be delivered express and even send you an update. So these both sentences are almost the same, but involve I can and I cannot statement. Next slide, please. There's a small exercise. I want you all to comment, and the statement is, Terry says, I was emotionally drained, heartbroken, and felt used by the reaction of my wife. She's a jerk and she is dishonest. How can we put this sentence in a positive way so that we understand and keep the promise that the other person is not getting hurt? Anyone? So I've put an example like what I understood was, Terry, can you feel, you say you feel disrespected. Can you describe specific things you would like to do what would demonstrate respect to you? So this could be in a positive way and a neutral way. And this helps the other person to understand more and elaborate more what they think about the emotions, about their reactions towards it. and do not trigger the other person. That is one of the important aspect. We have a comment. Terry, I think it took a lot of courage to share your feelings today. Can you tell me more about the experience? That's true. The other example is Jerry says that policy is sexist. How can we put this sentence in more elaborative way so that it doesn't harm or triggers the other person? For me, it says that you are concerned about how the policy affects women client. Anyone? Okay, so I can't see any comment coming up. So can we move to the next slide? From the above examples, we have learned that how it was, whether we know that the statements once stated was a negative statement, and how did we put into different words, collaborating with different words and techniques, that it is portrayed in a way that it is positive and do not triggers the other person, and it is more of a positive and a neutral way. What was the body language like? As Thalia have already mentioned, that one should take care of the body language, that how is the emotion attached, whether the person is aggressive towards it, how their reaction is, whether they are nail biting, or whether they are towards a sad moment, or how the reaction is. Did you acknowledge the emotions? That brings to the same part, that how did they acknowledge it? Were they aggressive towards it? Okay. Did you ask more questions when you are in a conversation? Did you ask for clarity? Did you ask for the conversation that the triggered statement or the statement that they have mentioned? Did you ask for clarity by reframing the same question again, which gives actually a chance to the speaker that they have indulged into a conversation, and what they say, they mean it. It's very important to have a clarification on the same part. Does your statement or does your language was abusive or inflammatory towards the other person, and they have triggered it or have caused harm towards it? And what does the solution look like? These are the important criteria that one should consider while reframing a statement or a communication towards a person, which will help in order to build a positive communication and provide clarity towards it. Next slide, please.
All right, everyone. So we don't want to take much more of your time. So let's just go over a quick recap of what we discussed today. So number one, and you guys were great for throwing in comments in the chat of what conflict is. So conflict can help us transform. It can help us move on. It can help us understand different interests and perspectives. Our conflict styles are not permanent. We can change them depending on the situation and what we want out of the situation. We can think about how we behave. We can think about how we impact others and how they impact us, and how we can choose to change our behavior. We can learn to acknowledge what our triggers are. We can focus on cultivating trust and safety in dialogue. We are able to check and question our assumptions and triggers. And we can use some tools from our toolbox, such as active listening, asking probing questions, using silence, and taking breaks. So the next slide is just a reference list of some of our professors, if you guys were interested in their work. Yep.
Sorry. These are just some from our lectures and intense training that for our interpersonal mediations that we have gathered all our information base. So this is all informative base, and where we get our learnings from. And that being said, I'd like to thank everyone for participating in this workshop. It's a very, we're appreciative on behalf of the students of Humber's ADR program, myself, Thalia, Nicole, Rachika, and we'd like to say thank you for your time and your interests to participate again into this workshop. We hope that we have touched on areas that make a difference to your approach and perceptions on the conflict management. We would like to say thank you to Maria and the Gatehouse community for allowing us to have this opportunity to present such a topic. And thank you again, and thank you everyone for participation. Please feel free to, contact us with any questions, feedback. I believe we will be providing a survey at the end of this presentation. You will get, I believe you'll get it in an email. Please respond. We look forward to this feedback. It would be great for us. If there's anything else that, who knows, down the line, we can touch on again for other areas that needs touching. Feel free to add any comments also. Again, thank you, and cheers, and enjoy your rest of your day.